God, I can't even believe how many years. I was a younger man when and she was younger as well. She was younger as well. And I've learned actually a lot about perseverance from knowing Alex. So this being her penultimate moment in ACWA, I encourage you all to welcome her, and please fill out the student reviews. They're really valuable for the students to get later, and they love your feedback. So without further ado, Alex.
That's for you.
That was for you as well.
The end is the beginning is the end. This is not the emotional story of my life. I do not plan on spending this time telling you about all the emotional stressors that plague me, or the time I was in a car accident and I suffered the effects of concussion and how I've handled it over the last 3 years. Quite frankly, I believe I've shared this story with most of you, and I doubt you're in the mood to hear it again. To be honest, I'm not in the mood to tell it. I'm not going to talk about my family or anything of that nature really, unless it's for the occasional example. And I don't aim for there to be any sadness in the things I share with you today, as a matter of fact. What I aim for is realization of character, of the social hierarchy, of male dominance and the standards set by today's society in regards to one of my favorite things, video games. There's a male-dominated world out there, and it is quite obvious in all of the things we as a society partake in. However, I feel that one of the areas it affects the most is the video game industry. The gaming industry is run by men, while there is the occasional female in the mix, the odds aren't exactly in women's favor. The belief has always been that video games are for men, and that men are the only ones who enjoy them. This is no longer true, not that it ever really has been. Women throughout the years have also found enjoyment in this electronic sport, in the portrayal of characters, in living and creating another life, in playing games and being able to immerse oneself into the worlds created. The female enjoyment of these things is shoved down, though. It's occasionally deemed ludicrous. You can see it through statistics about women in the gaming industry and who play games. There's also a lack of recognition, not only for those women, but for the characters in the game in relation to influence, enjoyment, and existence. The lack of female influence has always been the standard, and while I do believe the video game industry is changing to include females, it is on a relatively minute scale. Men still objectify women who play games and are in games. These are the points I plan to touch on today. Keep hydrated. Focus. Objectification and sexualization. I am not just for pleasure. My code does not only state that I be used in such a way. I have emotions and drive, and yet, when you depict me upon your screens, my coding tells a different story. I become fan service. No wants have I, except a desire to be saved. My drive is disabled software. Something that I want to touch on briefly is the objectification and sexualization of women in video games. I say briefly because I could probably spend longer than 40 minutes talking about the issues I see with these titles in regards to the topic. Women in gaming are objectified more often than not, and in many different ways. Women in games are also sexualized, as are the women who play them. Female gamers are generally seen as a sexual fantasy, something that can be blatantly seen almost everywhere you look. An example of the sexual fantasy that girls who play video games create can be seen in the idea behind Game Crush, which was a website where men could pay to play video games with young, attractive women, which, to be honest, is incredibly gross and sadly not uncommon, especially with how the female gamer is perceived. Then you have the argument that women don't even enjoy video games and only play them as a way to get with men and increase their sex appeal. In an article on Games Radar titled 9 Things Female Gamers Hate About Gaming, it lists off a multitude of the issues, including that one. Other notes on the list include the ever-popular saying of, "You don't look like a gamer," which is something I've personally heard quite a few times. The article also speaks to the issue about women who attempt to partake in online matchmaking scenarios. The standard situation, which my mom can attest to having had happen to her, is that you log on and start to play the game, and if you choose to speak, you immediately get responses of, "Is that a girl?" This generally is followed up either by the reactions that girls can't play that game, or the female in the situation gets hit on. This is actually one of the reasons I personally can't stand online matchmaking games. The way women are treated over the channels is so degrading that it's partially ruined online gaming for me, and while I know that I can always play with everyone on mute, it doesn't change that I still get treated differently. It's been shown that people with female gamer tags are generally sought out and killed more often than standard players. Another issue that arises for female games is centered around the idea of cosplay. Cosplay, for those of you who don't know, is dressing up as a character from an anime, movie, TV show, video game, etc. An example of this could be when I dressed up as Tiny Tina for Halloween. I mean, that's a little different, but you get the gist. Nowadays, the act of cosplaying has grown, and it includes people who cosplay as characters from video games. Now, if you thought the harassment women received over Xbox Live was bad, you'd be horrified to learn that some of the harassment women receive at conventions is worse. The harasser is no longer somewhere else in the world, but is right there in front of you, and there's just something men love about the ability to make sexual comments towards a woman. It seemed to be that once a woman put on a costume, she was no longer a person, and she became a sexual object instead. Things surrounding cosplay have been changing though, and at Emerald City Comic Con a few weeks back, there were signs up stating that cosplay isn't consent, which until recently wasn't a concept many grasped. But then there are female video game characters. Most of them can be seen holding a sign saying, "Welcome to video games, where skimpy outfits are all the rage." I say this because many female characters, ranging from ones in Street Fighter to the ladies of Dead or Alive, can be seen wearing next to nothing. One of the largest draws of these games is the scantily clad women and the fact that you can watch their chest bounce around as they fight. As a matter of fact, there are actually games where you can change how much the chest of a woman will bounce as she runs around, which, funny to a large population of male individuals, is in my mind degrading. Darian Nolan. It also goes to show how little respect the female form is given. Armor designs for females generally also fall into the barely there range. A lot of female armor options involve minimal coverage in an attempt to create optimal exposure. Now, while I don't have experience wearing a chainmail bikini, I can safely guess wearing one will be greatly uncomfortable and a hindrance. However, the presence of chainmail bikinis isn't the only example of poor armor design. A lot of other females' armor have flaws, like purely cloth tops that form deep V-necks that show a lot of cleavage. See Morrigan from Dragon Age. There are also types of armor that cover the upper half of the character, but leave almost the entire bottom half exposed. Now, this wouldn't be a huge problem, except for it's highly unrealistic and doesn't extend to male armor. I mean, not that I really want to see men in games running around in chaps or a loincloth, but I would be less offended by the armor choices in games if it wasn't just armor for women. Another example of female form exposure in video games is that of women like Cortana in Halo. Now, I love Halo, but I can admit that the design of Cortana, an artificial intelligence, is flawed. Her character is purely just blue and naked. Some might argue that there's nothing wrong with this, as she's an AI, to which I ask why she needs breasts if she is one. Now, aside from distinct physical attributes, there are a lot of stereotypical gender identifiers. While these aren't as present in your main console games and bestsellers, you can frequently find them in arcade games. These stereotypical identifiers include the put a bow on it motif, the color pink, and lots of makeup. These things have generally been associated with the development of female characters, especially in relation to the Miss Male character trope. And now on to tropes. You have your damsel in distress, the girl who gets kidnapped, which only happens so that our hero has a goal he must accomplish, aka Princess Peach. She's the quintessential damsel in distress, as she spends all of her time in Bowser's clutches so that Mario has somewhere to run and someone to be. The same thing can be said about Zelda throughout most of the Legend of Zelda games. You think with a title like Legend of Zelda, the games would be spent as, Zelda. But instead, you play as a boy named Link, whose goal is to save her. Then there's the action girl. One would think being the unattainable heroine with a confident and charismatic demeanor would be a good thing. However, it leads you down the path of the hypersexualized Lara Croft, who could often be seen wearing short shorts and a crop top or tank, sans bra. Her existence is based around her making men want her, but in a way that lets them know they can't have her. There's the girl whose only role is to be a plot device and to give the male character motivation. This is something I can accuse even one of my favorite games of doing. In The Last of Us, they kill off the daughter of the main protagonist as fuel for his relationship with other characters later on. And of course, there's the cutesy klutz, whose charm lies in the fact that she has a cute voice, tends to be on the younger side, and is known for stumbling all over herself in a way that's meant to be cute. See Vanille's personality in Final Fantasy XIII. And then you also have the Miss Male character that I mentioned a moment ago. And the first I heard about this was while watching a video of Anita Sarkeesian's. This trope brings light to the fact that many female characters are created to be a female version of the male character. Sarkeesian noted that the original Miss Male was Miss Pac-Man. From the time of her development to now, there have been a multitude of characters who display this trope, including female shepherd and or female hawk from Dragon Age. Now, these are some of your standard tropes in video games which Sarkeesian spoke out against. In 2012, Sarkeesian began a Kickstarter to fund her Tropes versus Women in Video Games videos, which address misogyny and tropes in video games. After starting her campaign, though, she immediately began to receive backlash, ranging from comments about her looks to death threats. Her attempt to bring the issues of misogyny in gaming to light was only proved by these threats. And despite receiving all of the misogynistic comments that she did, Sarkeesian refused to back down from the issue and in turn won this year's Game Developers Conference Award, Ambassador Award, for her efforts. Sarkeesian also was the first woman to win this award. Logistics and statistics. Your numbers show a need for me, yet you choose to deny us a place in your factory. You begin to lack diversity, and you will see everything you produce will provide monotony. Where would your games be without me? So, to begin, I want to give you a few of the basic stats about women in video games that I found throughout my research. First, women purchase 46% of video games. And according to the Entertainment Software Association, they also make up 48% of gamers. The female population of gamers over the age of 18 is actually greater than the population of male gamers under the age of 18. Now, I think these are some pretty rad numbers. The problem is, though, that these numbers don't have a large enough effect on video game development companies. You can see this in that only 11% of game developers are women. It can also be seen when one looks at the continual objectification of women in video games, the lack of adequate scene and screen time, and the simple fact that games with strong female protagonists only get 40% of the funding that games with male protagonists do. It gets even worse when you note that only 10% of characters in video games are females. As I mentioned just a moment ago, only 11% of game developers are women, and it seems to me that a lot of them could have been working on the Animal Crossing New Leaf for 3DS. In an article about the game, the project leader of Animal Crossing, Aya Kyogoku, talked about how much diversity in the workplace helped the Animal Crossing team to make a better game. She began by talking about how she used to be one of the only women, but as time went by, the amount of women in different roles in her workplace began to increase, as did the ideas that flowed from them. Sadly, not many people would see eye to eye with Kyogoku, as other game development companies have yet to welcome the idea that diversity in the workplace will create diversity in games. There's another problem with the entertainment side of gaming. While it isn't completely connected to the development of games, there's a whole community of people who play video games for a living and make games for other people to watch. There's actually a group of these people that I watch on YouTube called the Achievement Hunters, and as much as I love them, the lack of female influence in the office is pretty large. There are 6 males that are the main crew of the Achievement Hunters, and there's only 1 woman that we occasionally see. Granted, she also has a different job in the company, which is voicing Ruby from the animated show Rooster Teeth produces. There are other mediums that people can use to watch people game, including Twitch. Twitch allows you to look through different games and, after picking one, choose to watch someone play it. While an interesting medium, Twitch also lacks females, as the top grossing video makers on Twitch are men. While I do believe that there are a lot of issues with the numbers behind gaming, one of the things that I believe changed in a positive way this year can be contributed to Game Radar's top 10 games of the year. The first of which was The Last of Us. While you play as a man named Joel for most of it, you do get opportunities to play as the other lead in the game, which is a girl named Ellie. Followed by The Last of Us was Tomb Raider, the newest game centered around the life of Lara Croft. This game takes Lara back to before all the sexualization, making her a fully clothed, aspiring archaeologist who's just starting out. After Tomb Raider comes BioShock Infinite. While the main playable character in this game is male, it does justice to the idea of a female companion in the same way that The Last of Us does. Although Elizabeth is rescued, she proves she can hold her own and doesn't need Booker, the main character, to save her all that much more. After these 3 games come a slew of male-centric games, from Grand Theft Auto 5 to Battlefield 4. However, one more female-driven game managed to secure its spot at number 10, this game being the indie sensation Gone Home. While the fact that you are a girl doesn't play much into the game, the story you are mostly following is that of the sister, and it is based around her being a female and her sexual journey. Now, to the next bit of my logistics and statistics section. In 2012, The Ohio State University did a study on people who read a lot of fictional work. According to the study, the people who spent ample time reading works of fiction found themselves feeling the emotions, thoughts, beliefs, and internal responses that the protagonists in the story felt, as if they were their own. The researchers called this experience taking. They also found that, in certain situations, the experience taking could lead to real-life changes in the person interacting with the works of fiction, even if these changes were only temporary. An example they used in the study was the people who strongly identified with a character in a book who had just overcome obstacles to vote were more likely to vote in an upcoming election than they had previously been. Now, some of you might be wondering how this relates to video games exactly. Well, I believe that as video games are generally works of fiction, experience taking can occur in a similar way, especially in role-playing games like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, in which you design a character, and while you get to make some side choices, the story is still pretty linear. This being the case generally means that the personality of the character is pretty set in stone. I mean, sure, in Mass Effect you can be either Renegade or Paragon, but once you pick, it's kind of set. Part of me thinks that the experience taken from video games might even be more effective, as the person playing the game is part of the decision-making, instead of being a spectator to it. My queen bees, video games and me. You are my building blocks, so allow me to stack you up and build myself anew. And now I suppose is where we get back to me, and how everything I've just told you somehow relates and matters to me. Let's jump right back to the Ohio State University study, as I think that's a good place to start. I mentioned experience taking, and I believe that experience taking from video games has helped shape me into who I am today. Now, I'm not saying that in an I'm as incredible as Commander Shepard, look at me kind of way, but small parts have definitely changed. It's fueled my individuality, the way I handle situations, the way I handle people. I believe that some of the most vital parts of me have been molded around the personalities of the females in video games that I treasure the most. Now, growing up, I spent a lot of time playing video games. Granted, I didn't feel like there were all that many I in particular wanted to play, as even back when I was 9, I wanted to be able to play as a somewhat customizable female character. So, I tried to find games tailored to that. For the most part, I found generic girly games, which I attempted to play and eventually gave up on as well. I mean, I liked them, but they weren't what I was looking for. These games were mostly ones I found on the internet, ranging from your standard dress-up game, the only place I could really customize a girl to look the way I wanted her to mini-games and side-scrollers. There wasn't really anything for Xbox, which has always been my preferred console. Then I found this game called Cameo, Elements of Power, and it was the coolest thing. The entire game was centered around being able to play as this girl who controlled elemental creatures. I mean, I couldn't customize the way she looked at all, but it was still a chance for me to play as a female. While I don't believe the characters in the game held much weight for me, as I don't remember the game very well, it was still a bit of a milestone for me in the realm of gaming. It was a game that partially gave me what I wanted. It allowed me to feel more comfortable playing as a character and getting into a game more, as I was able to relate to the main protagonist. It gave me hope that there would be other games where I could play as a female that I would enjoy, which fueled my desire to continue to play video games. Of course, after Cameo there was Oblivion, that at the time I only played because I could run around in a dress. So when I was 9, my priorities were a little different and slightly skewed. Anyway, as I grew up more, there were games I grew to love. There was a big gap in how much I played video games, though. For the first half of middle school, I didn't play much, unless I was playing Halo with my mom as a way to squeeze in some quality time with her. I actually spent a good chunk of that time in a Halo league and played whenever she had a spare moment. Sidetracking for a minute, I just want to say that I feel lucky in the fact that my mom plays video games, and that my stepdad and uncle also play, because instead of having to hide my love of gaming, or being told that I play video games too much, they fostered this love I had and allowed me to play games. They bought me consoles I wanted, and games, and merchandise. I mean, for my 14th and 17th birthdays, all I asked for were the collector's editions of Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. And I have to say, I got both, and they're pretty rad. All in all, what I'm trying to say is that I love and appreciate them for allowing me to have the passion for video games that I do. Anyway, we can get back to the long and convoluted story in which I try to get to the point of how video games have shaped me. Okay, so it wasn't until 8th grade started that I really got into video games again, and I feel so lucky that I was able to. This was around the time when I discovered Commander Shepard, who I definitely have taken on as one of my biggest role models. Her character and the transition she's made throughout the series of Mass Effect games has been incredible, which I have to thank BioWare for. Especially since when I went back and played the first game after starting to look into all the things I've been talking about, I realized that the character development behind Femme Shepard wasn't exactly great. I mean, sure, she had the same story as Male Shepard, but she almost felt like a last-minute add-on to pacify and please people like me. Her character, however, definitely developed and became her own separate entity from Male Shepard in my mind, which is one of the reasons I adore her so much. I think playing as her has given me a drive that I didn't always have. I also have to credit Shepard with giving me an appreciation for the struggles people send your way, and being able to handle them. For a few years, that was definitely something I struggled with a lot, and playing Mass Effect as Shepard was something that got me through that period in my life. Shepard also doesn't conform to the ideals that men have placed on women in video games. She has a suit of armor that covers her entire body, she doesn't have any skimpy clothing, and she acts like a strong woman charged with saving the galaxy. Romance in her life is an optional side mission, and she's heavily focused on her goals. She's an example of what I believe women in video games should be, which is why I believe she was my first real gaming role model. Of course, I have tons of them. I mean, there's Tiny Tina, the newest version of Lara Croft, Edie, Jack, so on and so forth. In recent times, there have been a whole slew of them, which is one of the things I think is giving me hope for the gaming industry. While the ladies I just mentioned have helped shape me, Charlie was bouncing his legs, I'm sorry. While the ladies I just mentioned have helped shape me, I feel that there are 2 more female characters who've really done so much for me. These characters being Ellie from The Last of Us, IGN's Game of the Year, and GLaDOS from Portal and Portal 2. Ellie, quite honestly, might be my favorite video game character of all time, which is pretty funny considering she's from a PlayStation-only game. She's only 14 and is probably the most mature character in the game. She's also a complete spitfire who refuses to give in to anything people say. She's independent, strong-willed, sassy, and sarcastic, all traits I admire. She, like Shepard, doesn't let anything get in the way of her goals, whether it be zombies or a cannibalistic pedophile bent on making the worst of her winter. The moment where I decided Ellie was one of the most inspiring characters I'd seen on my TV and in video games was when she had to take care of Joel due to an accident that occurred a few scenes before in the game. She does this by taking over the role as the adult and hunting for food as well as taking care of other tasks. While doing this, she runs into the aforementioned cannibalistic pedophile that she has to save herself as well as Joel from. Then there's GLaDOS, who actually isn't really a human, but she was developed from a female that worked alongside Cave Johnson, the owner of Aperture Laboratories. Aperture Industries. Wow. Weekly Laboratories. Anyway, so really, she's as close to female as you can get in that regard. She's the sassiest, rudest, and most entertaining of the three. In the first Portal game, she's actually the antagonist, and spends most of her game trying to kill Shell, who is our mute hero. Her disdain and attempts to kill Shell are what led me to fall in love with her, especially since she's so blatant about it, going so far as to give the hero a companion that she ultimately makes her destroy. At the end of the first game, she dies only to come back in the second game and become an ally. Well, a sassy, demeaning ally, but an ally nonetheless, who spends most of the game as a potato. GLaDOS, I feel like, has helped me come into my personality in general. She's given me the courage to be more strong-willed and to be willing to put myself and my personality out there without feeling the need to care about what other people think. While that may sound a little rough, try to remember she isn't a good guy. Anyway, these three women have done quite a bit for me over the years, and they've helped me come to the realization that I want there to be more women like them in gaming, which led me to my ideal career choice: writing for video games. For a while, I struggled with figuring out what exactly I wanted to do for a living. I've always been in love with writing, and I wanted to find a way to incorporate that into the other things I loved. For a while, though, I was set on the idea of being an editor. That is, until I realized how exhausting that was for my time as the copy editor of the yearbook. Then I thought about the idea of combining two of my loves, writing and video games. This led me to the idea of that career. I want to be able to create the myth and the universe and the characters. I want to be able to shape and create something that other people can interact with, which is why my art component is what it is. What I wanted to be able to share with you artistically is something that I believe ties into what I want to do, but wouldn't exactly translate well into me reading to you. So, in a few minutes, I'm going to give you the rest of the time to look around the small gallery over there. Briefly though, I just want to explain to you my concept. So, as you will be able to see in a minute, there are 4 sets of photos, some of which have 4 photos and a piece of writing, others with 3. Each one of these sets is a different original character from a different video game universe and a different writing style. The writing styles include poetic prose, character bio format, journal entry, and the last is written in a way that makes it seem like an excerpt from a book. As I said, they are each from different video game universes, which include Borderlands 2, Mass Effect 2, The Last of Us, and Tomb Raider. The video game each one is for is stated at the top of the document. My goal in designing these characters was to show diversity and that there is no reason to have a template or fill or female. I tried to do this by creating characters generally not showcased in video games, such as women of color and trans women. I believe that these kinds of characters can be shown in gaming just as easily as your industry standard female, if not more easily. With a sense of character diversity, it can also lead to diversity in story. On a final note, I just want to say that the reason I place this in gallery form is that I believe there's something more personal about experiencing a character in your own mind than if I were to read it aloud, as we all go at different paces. Now, before I release you guys to look at the gallery, are there any questions?
What inspired each character that you created?
What inspired each of
Like
them?
personally, each character.
Well, I definitely think there's something of me in each one of them. Verna Kit, who is the character from Borderlands 2, and is my trans woman, displays this sassiness that I want to really represent, and is something that I strive to be that sassy and kind of have that no care attitude. And then they each kind of represent different sides of me. Moira, who is the character from Mass Effect 2, which you were the model for, is kind of stuck in this idea of like she wants to leave home, but like she kind of can't. And so I felt that, even though I know I can leave home, but I just always had that urge to travel. And so they each represent different pieces of me, I think.
Do you have any idea of which college you want to go to?
Yeah, I actually already accepted, well, I was accepted into Pacific University, and I signed on to go there next year. So, are there any more questions? No? Well, then I'll release you guys to look at the gallery.
Do you actually want the form, or can I just like tell you how wonderful you are? Tell me how wonderful I am. You're wonderful. Oh my god. Yes, oh my god, you're so good. You're just so cute sitting up here.
I'm gonna be back. I got a nose.
You look so good.
What? Oh my god!
So I'll be right back.
I think she knew that though. I think she was just playing.
But nobody else is gonna take it that way.
But it doesn't matter.
I don't think anybody thinks you really enjoy the fact that
Yeah, no. I don't think you need to worry about it.